covered in 30 centimetres of deep litter for the birds to scratch around in and to soak up droppings. Wood chip mulch is a cheap option. When this batch needs replacing, it'll go straight on the compost heap. Using a deep litter in this way also helps reduce the build-up of parasites. The chooks will also need a perch to roost on at night and cosy nesting boxes for laying eggs. It's time to introduce the chooks to their new home. These guys are Highline Browns. They're quiet, passive, non-flighty birds that are well suited for the suburban backyard. They are fantastic layers, and at 20 weeks of age, they will start to produce eggs as soon as they have settled in. For chickens to lay regularly, they need to be well fed. In addition to kitchen scraps and free-range foraging, I'll also give these guys some grain each day. Soaking it for 24 hours beforehand makes it easier to digest so they get more nutrition from it. It's also essential that birds have access to fresh water. A water dispenser like this one needs to be refilled weekly. Hanging the hoppers off the ground keeps them clean and out of the reach of rats. So now I've got veggies out the front and chooks out the back, and I'm absolutely loving it. Even better, there's still more to come. The next step is to get to work on my native garden. As you can see, the veggies are doing beautifully. There's always a few weeds to contend with at this time of year, but they make fantastic chook food. And with the recent arrival of the winter rains, it's time for the next step in my home permaculture project, the native verge garden. The benefits of planting natives in the garden are well known. They provide valuable urban habitat, they don't require much water or fertiliser, and they help to create a sense of place. Planting up the verge puts the space to use, and it also means that everyone can enjoy it. I'll also plant along the neighbouring fence line. But before we get started, I thought we'd wander down the street and check out a great example of a native garden to get inspired as well as to pick up a few tips. G'day, Luke.
How are you, Josh?
I'm good, mate. And yourself?
Pretty well.
Excellent. Look, this garden is just looking lovely.
Thanks very much.
And as you know, I'm putting mine in up the road, and I'm down here for some tips, so give me the lowdown.
Well, Josh, with the verge planting, I think you've got to keep a few things in mind. Pick your species, hopefully, that are local, I think, because thematically they work well together. I've tried to tie this verge in with the existing trees, so the original structure of the jarrahs and the marries that are in this area naturally. I've put in the Banksia menziesii, I've put in local shrubs. I've kept it nice and open, as you see, so it presents itself to the house, and you haven't got any security risks.
And there's a lot of diversity here too, Luke.
Fairly good variety, and I've gone for things about a metre and a half, such as the scarola and the Grevillea thelmaniana. These are sort of things that you can keep to a good shape, so I do work them a little bit, but heavy mulch, and at the moment I'm planting everlastings just amongst them in some open ground.
Now, before you launch into planting up your verge, there are two things you have to do. Firstly, contact your local council to get approval. And secondly, dial before you dig, to make sure you know the whereabouts of services such as power, water and gas. Because if you damage them, you have to pay. Having a plan to plant to is also important. The height of the plants will determine where they get planted. Trees and tall shrubs are best planted in the centre, towards the footpath side, and only plants with a low habit should be planted on the curbside and along the driveway so the line of sight to the road is not obscured. This is how the verge used to look. Preparation for this area included removing unwanted plants and weeds, as well as some basic earth shaping to create an interesting profile. Getting rid of lawn and weeds can be tough work, but it's essential for the natives to do well. Now the fun really begins. We're starting by transplanting these mature zamia palms and grass trees. These stunning specimens were rescued from land clearing that would have otherwise seen them destroyed. My mate Bruce is committed to saving as many of these beautiful plants as he can, and he works tirelessly to get them out of the way of bulldozers and into people's gardens, at the same time raising awareness of the issues of land clearing.
Both the grass trees and the macrozamias transplant really well. You should expect around a 75% success rate if you water them well. That's the key success factor. We trim off the roots. In the case of the macrozamias, we want to seal off the roots so that no rotting can occur in the bulb. We apply some soil conditioners. We want some native plant-friendly soil conditions here. And we get soil from the site and put it into the hole as well. That contains important microorganisms that the plants definitely need to survive. Put the plant into the hole to the finished height and slowly backfill. When we're doing this, we want to get a lot of water in and get all the soil back in around the roots, and to help with that, we use a concrete probe which vibrates the air and water and helps most of the air come out from around the root balls. Finally, we build up the soil around the base of the tree to facilitate deep watering on an ongoing basis.
Now it's time to plant the shrubs, ground covers and flowering herbs. I've got a wonderful spread of grevilleas here, including Grevillea presii, which has a lovely soft grey foliage and it's already coming into flower. Grevillea obtusifolia has a lower habit and a glossy green leaf. This one's Grevillea crymphifolia with quite a pretty little white flower. It's a bit taller and a bit more vigorous. With the flowering herbs, we've got the Conostylus, which has a pretty little yellow flower, and of course the classic kangaroo paw. This one's Aconisanthus manglesii. If we get regular rains this winter, most of these guys will be able to cope on their own. However, a couple of deep waterings over the summer will ensure that just about all of them survive. The native verge garden is well underway. When we've planted up and they fill out, it's going to look absolutely stunning. More importantly, the birds and insects they attract will bring this garden to life. Just look at these veggies. They've only been in the ground for 2 months and I'm already eating out of the garden every day. Now the trick to growing luscious veggies like this year after year without the use of pesticides is by bringing other life into the garden to create a balance. And we do this by making habitat. Now I've already got loads of companions and my natives out the front, so the next step in my home permaculture project is to set up the constructed wetland out the back. In permaculture, we draw inspiration from local natural systems as a guide when designing. My constructed wetland is modelled on the natural wetlands which occur in Perth that rise and fall with the water table. In winter, it will fill up, overflow and recharge the shallow aquifer. In summer, the level will drop due to evaporation, so the plants will need to be able to handle partial drying out. There are 3 sections to this wetland: an open water section, a lined sedge bed and a dry edge section with a total area of around 30 square metres. The open water section comprises less than a quarter of this in order to reduce the amount of water lost to evaporation. Locating it under partial shade further reduces evaporation. During dry weather, the sedge bed and dry edge plants will be irrigated with just enough grey water to keep them looking good. The overall result is a visually impressive feature with relatively modest water requirements. As you can see, we're off to a good start. We've dug the hole and stabilised it with old pavers, slabs and carpet that we salvaged during the clean-up of the site. Now, sand is great to dig in, but it must be stabilised to prevent it from slumping. This ridge will set the high water point for the open water section, so it's important that we get it level and stable. A piece of straight timber and a spirit level tells us that we're on track. Next, we mark the high water mark on the slabs with a piece of chalk. The outer edge of the liner will be laid beneath this point, allowing the overflow to soak away. The pond's been dug to 1 metre. There'll be about 20 centimetres of sand on the base, which will give a water depth of around 80 centimetres. In summer, as the level drops, the sides will be exposed, but there'll always be some ponding water at the bottom. In winter, when it fills up, it'll overflow, feed the outer sedges before soaking away. Laying the liner can be a bit awkward, particularly in windy weather. The trick is to do it carefully, so it's not damaged in the process. This product is 0.4 millimetres thick, UV stabilised, and is guaranteed for 10 years. Steel pins will hold the liner in place. Now, this is the overflow point, so it doesn't matter that we're puncturing the liner. There we go, nice and secure. Next, we cover the liner with jute matting, which helps the sand cling to the liner on steep sides until the plants get established and the roots can hold it in place. We're using the sand from the hole to fill the base of the outer section, with clean wash sand on top. We're also using the clean sand for the open water section, because this locally sourced material doesn't bring with it the nutrients that can quickly turn still water stagnant. Native wetland plants are available from specialist nurseries, and you can also ask for advice about species local to your area. I'm going to plant Chenoplectus validus in the pond section. This tolerates some inundation, as does Bomea articulata. And around the upper section of the ponded area, I'll plant Juncus kraussei. On the outer section, along the back, I'll plant Juncus pallidus, which is quite tall. Along the front, which is also along the path, I'll plant this one, which is Isolepis sinua. It's a much smaller plant, only grows to 20 or 30 centimetres. And around the outside, in the dry section, I'll plant this one, Isolepis nodosa. Now, it looks like a wetland plant, but it really tolerates quite dry conditions. When the pond section fills up and settles in, I'll introduce local pygmy perch, gilgies, freshwater mussels and frogs. Once established, it will be low maintenance and self-sustaining, only requiring an occasional topping up of water during dry weather. Needless to say, if you have small children around, you should always fence a water feature or provide some form of barrier. My local council doesn't require a fence around ponds, but I've made sure that the backyard is securely fenced off. A water feature like this has many other functions in the garden aside from just providing habitat, such as influencing microclimate, and of course it just looks beautiful. When I finish planting up this wetland, the next big step in my home permaculture project is to set up the drip irrigation system. It may seem strange to be talking about irrigation on a rainy day, but Perth's long hot summer is just around the corner, and it's important to be prepared for it. You've already heard me rave on about drip irrigation. I've been using it for years and I am convinced it's the way to go. Drip line in particular, because it provides uniform watering and it is so easy to install. Originally developed for the agriculture sector, drip line is now gaining acceptance as the best option for water efficient irrigation in landscape applications. There's no overcast, wind drift or shadowing. The water's placed right at the roots where you want it. As a result, there's less weeds and fungal diseases. Just like sprinklers, there are different types of drip line and different ways to set up a system. I'm using a product that is suited for sandy soils. It has drippers at 15 centimetre intervals, and each dripper discharges 1.9 litres per hour. When the lines are spaced at 30 centimetres apart, it applies water at around 40 litres per square metre per hour. I'm setting up an automated system that will irrigate selected parts of the garden as efficiently as possible. Each group of plants will be watered on a separate line. Veggies, shrubs, fruit trees and natives all have very different water needs, so it makes sense to have the flexibility to be able to irrigate them independently of each other. The first step is to conduct a pressure and flow test on my water supply to determine the maximum area that I can irrigate on each line, ensuring that the required flow and pressure is being provided to the drippers. Adjust the gate valve until the pressure dial reads 150 kilopascals. Time how long it takes to fill a 9 litre bucket and record the results. Repeat this process at 200 kPa and 250 kPa. With the time taken to fill the bucket, a soil sample and a basic plan of your garden, your irrigation retailer will be able to recommend a suitable drip line product, the maximum station sizes for each line, as well as the pipe sizes for your supply lines. If you buy your materials from them, they'll normally do this for free. I've done my calculations and I know that one supply line will be adequate for each group of plants because they're relatively small areas. I've also determined the pipe size of the supply lines. I'll use 25mm poly for the long runs and 19mm poly for the short runs. Running the supply lines along fences and the edges of pathways reduces the chance of them being